There's an old joke about two economics grad students walking through a forest when they came across a pile of cow dung. The first grad student says to the other, "I'll pay you $100 to eat that pile of shit." The second grad student thinks for a while before remembering that he decided to be an academic as a career and he was in no position to turn down $100. So he gets out his knife and fork and digs in. A little while later, the pair come across a second pile of cow dung, and the second student decides he wants his friend to deal with the same awful taste he had to. So he says, "I'll pay you $100 to eat that pile of shit." The first student, already regretting paying $100 for the dare earlier, decides he needs his money back, so he whips out his emergency spoon and digs in. Walking a little more, the first student looks at the second and says, "You know, I gave you $100 to eat shit, and then you gave me back the same $100 to eat shit. I can't help but feel like we both ate shit for nothing." "Have you learned nothing at university?" responded the second student. "We increased service sector GDP by $200 and created 2 new jobs." Politicians and businesses love talking about the jobs they create because they know people respond positively to more employment in the economy.
Today our cities are flooded with illegal aliens. Americans are being squeezed out of the labor force and their jobs are taken.
Get rid of second jobs, with some exceptions. Some people have jobs where they need to top up their skills.
In the future, I think there will be new jobs.
We have created more than 13 million new jobs.
If there are more jobs for more people, then that means more income for households, more opportunities for individuals, more customers for businesses, and more tax revenue for the government. It also means more people are being productive members of society, making the goods and services that everybody else gets to enjoy. But if you follow this simple train of thought, it's easy to lose track of the bigger picture. Work is not the end goal of a good economy. It's the resulting goods and services that come from the work that are. Creating jobs for the sake of creating jobs is really no different to the poor old econ students chowing down on cow pats. It's funny when it's an ironic joke, but this simple ideology is probably costing you more than you realize. This next part will probably make you angry, and individually that's the right way to feel. But that anger at what I'm about to say is why this excuse has become so popular. Take a look at this chart of new jobs created in school systems across America since the year 2000. The number of new teachers has stayed more or less in line with the number of new students, which makes total sense. But now take a look at the number of new jobs created for principals and assistant principals. It's grown at more than 3 times the rate of new students, mostly because principals are getting assistants and the principals of large schools are getting multiple assistants to help run their office. Alright, the need for those jobs is a bit questionable, but at least principals and their assistants are still working in the schools themselves. The fastest growing group of all, though, has been the administrative staff. These jobs have grown 11 times faster than regular old teaching jobs and 11 times faster than the number of students. Teachers are highly qualified and underpaid for what they do, whereas administration positions are normally more highly compensated, have lower prerequisites, and are more comfortable than being in a classroom. While there are endless reports about teacher shortages, underfunding, and poor academic performance, the whole system has effectively turned into a jobs program that occasionally educates some students. For people on one side of the aisle, this is a great way to point out government inefficiency and advocate for a privatized school system. And the people on the other side of the aisle don't want to be responsible for cutting out that many jobs, so the status quo remains. Now, education is far from the only jobs program disguised as a public service. Homeless services have become a major expense for cities across the world, and when reporters looked into specific programs in Los Angeles, they found a complicated web of overlapping government agencies, non-profit operators, and opportunistic contractors. The city was spending hundreds of millions of dollars on housing people when it turned out very few people ended up getting a house. But these programs were almost impossible to walk back or streamline because it creates jobs. Now, for some unknown reason, you've probably been hearing a lot about tariffs over the last 3 weeks. Now, there has been a lot of misinformation about what these actually are and who actually pays for them on both sides of the political aisle. When a country like China ships something to a country like the USA, it might be subject to a tariff, which the Chinese company will need to pay to get its products through customs. If there is no local supplier of the same product in America, then the Chinese company can just raise the price of that product and pass it along to consumers, which would mean that you do end up paying for it, but not directly. If there is a local supplier of the product that can't compete with cheap goods coming from China, then that business might be at risk of shutting down and taking local American jobs with it. A tariff can level the competition by making the imported goods more expensive. Now, if the Chinese company wants to compete, it might not be able to pass along the entire cost of the tariff to the consumer, and instead, it will have to accept that some of the cost will come out of its profit margins, in which case it actually is the Chinese company that ends up paying at least part of the tax. But even in these rare circumstances, prices would still be higher for consumers than if the cheap Chinese imports were allowed to enter the market with no markup at all. This means that many economists oversimplify it by calling it a tax on consumers, which isn't wrong, it just makes it more confusing for people to actually understand how these systems work. Now, despite their details, or very well documented inefficiencies and complications, they still remain politically popular because they protect jobs. The political pressure to put anybody in any job becomes particularly apparent before an election, but the private sector is just as guilty as perpetuating the "it creates jobs" excuse as the government is. Private companies have a profit motive, which would make you think that they would cut down on unnecessary expenses wherever possible, and for many businesses, their largest expense center is their employees. But under certain circumstances, hiring more employees than is really necessary can help these profit-driven companies as well. In his book, Bullshit Jobs, the anthropologist David Graeber outlines how the corporate world has become inundated with middle management white-collar jobs that effectively achieve nothing, but they either make company management feel good about having lots of employees, or they fix up some issue created by another bullshit job. The examples Graeber gave of internal company newsletter writers, multiple receptionists, and administrative coordinators for increasingly bloated administration departments are probably things you've experienced yourself if you spent long enough in an office. Companies run on a system where full-time employees must work 40 hours per week because that's what they're getting paid for. So if someone's core responsibilities get completed within 20 hours, they just get given more tasks to do to fill out the week, even if those tasks are not essential to business operations. A payroll manager that finishes their timesheets early might use their spare time to create an office culture project, which obviously isn't as important as getting people paid, but it does round out the week and keep them looking busy. The problems start if the company opens more locations and processing payroll becomes a 40-hour-week task again. In this case, it's not unthinkable that the company would just hire another payroll manager because the first one is already at capacity with their additional responsibilities as a culture coordinator. In his book, Graeber argued that even profit-motivated companies often don't have profit-motivated managers. They have managers that want to keep themselves looking just busy enough so they can collect their salary. Now, you probably witnessed this firsthand in your own job, but even most senior-level company managers who do have incentives aligned with the company performance can often hire inefficiently on purpose. Despite what they may say, big incumbent businesses love strict regulations and lots of technical boxes to be ticked, because while it's easy for them to hire teams of people to make sure they remain compliant, it's much harder for small startup competitors to waste the limited resources they have to do the same. Defense contractors spread their operations out across state and national borders so they can create jobs for as many budget-setting representatives as possible. There's no real reason that the supply chain for an F-35 fighter jet needs to look like this, but this map represents thousands of jobs across dozens of districts, which in turn means that any plan to rein in spending on this program will be met with fierce opposition from those representatives who just want to create jobs for their constituents. The program and others like it may have gone way over budget, but it creates jobs, so we all have to get out our knives and forks and eat it. A more controversial example of the same kind of intentional inefficiency recently played out in ports across America. Strikes by the International Longshoremen's Association ran briefly as a result of disputes over pay and automation in ports across the American East Coast. Now, if you ever wanted an example of how powerful unions can be, they secured a 62% pay increase for their workers over the next 6 years after less than 2 days on strike. However, what was not figured out was the issue of automation in the ports where these longshoremen work. The union was fighting for a deal that would completely ban any automation that could replace workers' jobs. A lot of people argued that this was a totally ridiculous request because you can't fight the march of progress. That would be like banning electric bulbs to keep the lamplighters in business. The union is continuing to challenge this though because they represent their workers, and this is exactly the point of why creating jobs is seen as a good thing no matter what. You probably agree that having jobs is a good thing when the alternative is needing a job and not having one. You probably also agree that most jobs kinda suck. Yes, there are some hustle bros that rise and grind every day, and there definitely is merit in contributing to the world. But if you were to describe your perfect day, sitting in a cubicle farm probably wouldn't be in the picture. The reason we can have these conflicting beliefs is because of a practical economic reality. For most of you watching, the greatest income producing asset you own is your ability to do work in exchange for money, and for many it's their only way to earn an income. As someone whose most valuable assets are the secondhand microphone I'm speaking into and the 8-year-old MacBook I'm editing this video on, I'm right there with you. If there wasn't an active market where I could exchange my time for money, I would have no way of providing for myself. According to a report by McKinsey & Company, human capital, as in your ability to work, represents 2/3 of wealth for the average individual. For most people, it will be even higher than that, because financial wealth is not evenly distributed and it's skewed by the extreme wealth held by a few. Creating jobs is the easiest way for people to exchange that theoretical wealth for actual wealth that they can use to pay their bills, save up for a house, and maybe even enjoy life's little luxuries like food. Now, individuals, politicians, businesses, and management all looking out for their own best interests means we get a system where making jobs is okay for everyone but great for nobody. Automation has the potential to give us more wealth for the same work, or the same wealth for less work, but in our current system it's more likely just going to be used to cut expenses wherever possible. A survey conducted by Pew Research found that 52% of people were now more concerned about AI than excited, and only 10% of people were more excited than concerned. Negative sentiment towards this technology has spiked over just the last 3 years, because aside from the whole Skynet thing, they see AI as a threat to their jobs, not an opportunity that could improve their lives. The truth is, it could be both, but in a system where we need our jobs to survive, one is far more scary than the other is exciting. Now, this is where we talk about the radical solution to this problem. Ideas like universal basic income often get floated as a compromise where markets can still exist, but redundant workers don't starve to death. The logical challenge to this idea is how we're going to pay for it, and these criticisms are fair, but a great place to start saving some money would be to not waste money just to create jobs for the sake of creating jobs. Adam Smith, the grandfather of economics and free markets, even said as much hundreds of years before the opportunities and/or threats of widespread automation were known. All that toil, all that anxiety, all those mortifications which must be undergone in pursuit of it, and what is of yet more consequence, all that leisure, all that ease, all that careless security which are forfeited forever by the acquisition. Technology and automation could make a future where we don't need to work. It's up to us to build a system around it that makes that a good thing. As always, please tell me why I'm wrong in the comments below. Healthy discussion helps everybody form a well-rounded opinion, and it helps the algorithm too. If you want to watch a less controversial video, check out this one where I point out the hypocrisy and money grubbing of one of the world's most popular financial role models.